everybody, my name is Nicole. Welcome to the Pine Cottage. Today I'm going to talk about all the books that I read during the month of January. So I hope you will join me and we will get started. The first thing that I want to show you is this is my bullet journal, and I wrote, well, first of all, I keep a page that is like a bookshelf, and I drew in books, and then every time I read a book I put the title in there and then I shade it in a color depending on the genre. Books on writing are gray for me, nonfiction is like a beige, memoir is green, and fiction is like an orange rust color. So I kind of keep track of my books that way. I read 9 books. My first book was one that I'm very surprised that I even read because it is by a celebrity. And I am not one to pick up books by celebrities. Half the time, they're not the ones writing the book anyway. I don't want to say I have a chip on my shoulder, but I kind of just feel like, really, you need more attention. Don't you have enough? I just have a bad attitude about it. Sometimes there are exceptions on why I pick up a celebrity memoir. In this case, I did because this person is very intriguing to me. My husband's very much into watching like actors' studio things and actors' interviews, and he's just someone that I feel like he's kind of himself, maybe. I mean, I don't know him personally, so I don't know if he's truly being himself, but I just felt like he was genuine. This is Matthew McConaughey's Greenlights. I also did a quick little search on my internet browser to see how it rated. I checked on Goodreads to see what other people thought of it, and it got pretty good reviews. So I was like, well, I'm just gonna pick it up then and give it a shot. You guys, I was really surprised. It was very well written. He's definitely a writer at heart. He writes how he would speak. It's very conversational, the way that he writes, which I enjoy. It was very quick. Like I read this in one evening, like one afternoon evening. It was very readable, very easy to read. It was like he was sitting in the room with me having a conversation. And he puts little snippets of poetry that he saved over his lifetime during his childhood, his adolescence. He's always written. And I was surprised. I was shocked by this. I was eating crow because I'm like, oh, celebrity. And then he comes out with this great memoir. He is very open and honest about his life and his family and his relationship with his father, which at times was very, some would say abusive, but there is this mutual love there between them. And, you know, we think, or we say all the time, you know, you never know what goes on between those 4 walls, you know, or what goes on behind closed doors. And he shows us what went on behind those closed doors. And he's just very vulnerable in this book, which I appreciated. I appreciated because if you're going to put out a memoir, obviously it's not about your entire life. It's about this little snippet, this little snapshot of your life, this little moment or a group of moments, but it's not spanning your whole lifetime. It doesn't encompass everything that you are. It encompasses a piece of who you are. And he's taken that piece and he's just opened the door. He's taken the door off the hinges. He just lets us in. And I really appreciate that. And I also appreciate how he talks about, you know, he does discuss the idea of celebrity and how he's very uncomfortable in it, or at least was when he first became famous. And even now, when he feels like Hollywood is, you know, really pushing him and changing him in ways he doesn't want to be changed, he just picks up and leaves. And he'll go out, you know, to another country and meditate. He'll go to Texas and he just takes off. Like, I need to become me again. And I really admire that. I definitely would recommend this book. I gave this book 4.5 stars because I think it's worth it. So 4.5 stars for Greenlights, Matthew McConaughey. Another book that I read, it's another memoir, and this is by Maggie Smith, titled You Could Make This Place Beautiful. And this book is titled this based on a poem that she wrote that is really a beautiful poem, and she includes it in this book. And this book takes you through the process of her divorce. I could relate to this book in a couple ways. One, it takes place in Ohio, which I live in Ohio. She would take anniversary trips with her now ex-husband to Hocking Hills State Park, which is where my husband and I like to go together. Also, my husband and I were both married to other people before we met each other. And we both married our high school sweethearts. The relationships, the marriages did not last long. We did not have children with those people, but we are both divorced. We have both gone through divorce. So in that respect, I could relate to this book. I did not have children when I went through my divorce, so that was different and heartbreaking in this book. But I gave this book 4.5 stars. I thought it was very well written. Again, it was very honest. And as I said, if you're going to write a memoir, you have to be honest because your reader is going to see right through you if you're not. She's very vulnerable, but she's also very fair. This isn't an ex-husband bashing book by any stretch of the imagination. So I thought she did a really fine job of keeping it fair, keeping it honest, and just really, really good writing. On that same note of really good writing, this is The Great Spring by Natalie Goldberg. She is an amazing writer. She wrote the book Writing Down the Bones, which is a book on writing. So as a writer, I've studied that book. So I thought, oh, I think I'll read something else by her. And this was one that came up. It is a collection of essays. The subtitle is Writing, Zen, and This Zigzag Life. So she's not necessarily talking about the art of writing, but her essays definitely, you know that in whatever situation she puts herself in, she's also there because she's a writer. Also, she practices Zen. She is a Buddhist, and she talks a lot about her journey through that. The thing that I loved the most about this book, and I've talked about it before, how I like to read about people who don't necessarily agree with me on everything. I like to surround myself with people who like-minded people. That's why I have a knitting channel. That's why I'm here talking about books with you. But I also enjoy learning what other people think about things, even if their opinions or their beliefs are different than mine. I don't know. I just think it's healthy to diversify your reading and where other people come from. You just learn more about each other as a human race, and I think that that's important. What's wonderful about this book is she is very self-deprecating in her journey. She is constantly falling short of her goals. She is going to these monasteries and meditating for hours, and she's exhausted and she just wants a candy bar, and she doesn't want to be there anymore. She can't wait to leave. She can't stop thinking about leaving. Like, it's just all very human nature things. Like, that's just what we do as humans. We get hungry and we get tired and we get restless, and it just made me laugh. As a Christian, you know, we go through periods of time throughout the year where we fast from certain foods or we fast from food altogether. And it's the same thing. Like, the mind and the body still want the things that you've restricted. And instead of thinking about them, sometimes that's all you can focus on. So it was just fun to read this experience from her and to read, and you feel like you're seeing her inner thoughts about these things. And she's just honest about her humanity. And I really enjoyed that. So I gave this book 4.5 stars. I thought it was very well written, of course, because she's an amazing writer. And yeah, it was a great read. Natalie Goldberg. The next book I want to talk about is a book that I listened to. It was an audiobook. The title is Thicker Than Water, and it's by Megan Collins. This is one that I got from the Libby app from the library. I just put in the search engine that I wanted to listen to a thriller. It's a psychological thriller. I had never heard of this author before. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. It was a fine story. I felt like it was more a story about relationships and friendships than it was about the actual thriller thing that was happening. There is a murder. You're trying to figure out who did it, but there isn't a major, there is a plot twist, but it's not something where you couldn't have figured it out. Like, I kind of guessed who it was. I like to be completely shocked. I like to be knocked over by the endings of a good thriller. For instance, the thriller that I listened to before this one was The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. That is a 5-star read. That is a thriller. Number one, it's hard for me to listen to audiobooks because I can't focus on them. My mind wanders, and unless it is fantastic writing, I really struggle with them. This book did not hold my attention quite as well as that book did, but it wasn't completely awful where I didn't finish it. But would I recommend it to someone who wanted a good thriller? Probably not. So I'm thinking 3 stars for that one. While we're on the topic of audiobooks, they are not my favorite. Number one, like I said, my mind wanders. I am not an auditory learner. I have a hard time focusing. I definitely have attention deficit disorder, and so I am more visual. I need to be kind of reined in, but because I love to knit, a lot of times it's the only way to get a book in at the same time. Thrillers and psychological thrillers, those are really the only genre that I will listen to in audiobook form because there's generally some action happening to keep me engaged in the book. The second reason I don't really care for audiobooks is the narration. A lot of times the person reading the story, their voice annoys me, or the way they read annoys me, the inflections that they make, I'm not a fan. So it has to be a really good narrator. A lot of times if they have an English accent, I can listen to it easier. I don't know why, but sometimes that makes a difference for me. The third thing that I really don't care for when it comes to audiobooks is that I can read a book a lot faster than I can listen to an audiobook. So sometimes I'm like, can we just get on with it? I just want to be done with this book already, knowing that if I were reading it, I would have been. So that's kind of frustrating for me. It's not my favorite way to read a book. Moving on. The next book that I read is nonfiction. This is entitled Gut by Julia Enders. And this book is all about the intestinal tract. And the reason that I wanted to read it is because I've struggled my whole life with my digestive system. I've spent the last 5 to 10 years learning about my body and what it likes and what it doesn't like. I eat plant-based now to correct a lot of the things that don't work as nicely in my body, and that seems to be working. I wanted to read this book just to learn more about that and more about the connection between the gut and the brain. I think a lot of things that are in this book are true based on the changes that I've made in my own diet and seeing how the effects have improved my body and brain and the way that I work. I'm less foggy. So definitely an interesting read and one that I would recommend if you are struggling at all with your digestion or your gut health. There's also one section here. There are illustrations in this book, which are kind of funny. They make me chuckle. But there's one section here that talks about motion sickness. I am someone who does get motion sickness in the car. I can't read or knit in the car, especially, we do a lot of camping. So if we're driving through West Virginia, it's always the worst because it's so windy and awful, and I just feel like I want to puke the whole time. And when I'm motion sick, I just want to eat because it settles my stomach, so I just end up overeating when we're traveling, which is always the worst. Okay, now I can't find it. I should have marked the page. Here it is. So my aunt gave me this bracelet that you put on, and it like pulses here on the wrist. You can feel almost immediately your brain like open up, and your stomach settles, and no motion sickness. Like, this is what normal people must feel like. My children also get motion sickness, and so we were passing this bracelet around as we were driving on vacation last summer because we all just wanted to feel the relief, and it worked so well. So I need to buy a couple more of them. But when I was reading this book, there is a section that talks about how you can just apply pressure on this area of your wrist and it will relieve that motion sickness. So when my husband and I went on our trip, I didn't have the bracelet with me. And we were in southern Ohio and it was very windy roads. And so I just applied pressure like that diagram suggested, and it worked. And it's like, oh my goodness. Like, I wish I would have known this when I was a child on all the road trips that we took as a family, because this information would have been very useful. I give this book 3.5 stars because it does read like a textbook. It can get really dry, And while I was interested in the information, and I will probably refer back to this book several times in the future, it wasn't something that I would just say, oh, this is a great read, you should read it. If you're someone who struggles with your gut and you want to learn more about how everything works or doesn't work, definitely a good read, but it does read more like a text. The Faraway Nearby by Rebecca Solnit. It is a collection of essays. I gave this book 3.5 stars. This was my first time reading this author, and from what I could find on different sites, she is recommended very often. She's very literary. Her writing is very good. That is not what I had an issue with. This book in particular, I felt like she does research, and she does it so well. Like, I felt like I was reading a peer-reviewed medical journal article or something, but she's researching literature. So she mentions a lot of literature, and then she analyzes it constantly throughout the whole book. And that just was kind of much for me. I didn't like it. It didn't flow for me. It wasn't enjoyable. It did spark some curiosity about some things that I haven't read. Like, I might take some of those recommendations of the things that she was talking about and researching, but as a whole, it didn't flow well for me because she was constantly referring to something else. And I just kind of wanted her to tell the story. That's how that book went for me. Gave it 3.5 stars. The next book I want to talk about is My Dyslexia by Philip Schultz. I gave this book 4 stars. This is a memoir by a man who was researching dyslexia for his son, I believe, and then in his research realized that he also struggled with dyslexia. It just wasn't something that they knew about when he was a child. So he's talking a lot about his experiences growing up in school, the challenges that he faced, and I read this book kind of to do my own research, sort of as a case study to learn more about this because I feel like this is something my son is struggling with and he is being assessed for. This was it was personally an interesting read for me to learn about his experiences, not only with his son, but with himself. I homeschool my son, so I want to learn different ways in which I can teach him that he will be able to learn best. So this was just another book that I could read to learn more. I gave that book 4 stars. Not necessarily that he was like the best writer in the world, but I felt, again, this was very conversational. I felt like I was sitting in the room with him and he was telling me his story, and I thought it was very well done. So 4 stars. There were 2 5-star books in January, and the first one I already talked about in my knitting podcast. So if you haven't watched that video, I will stick it up here. If you're not a knitter, you can fast forward to the book review part. I talk in length about this book and what I liked about this book, and definitely a 5-star read. This book is by Caitlin Doty. It is titled Smoke It's in Your Eyes and Other Lessons from the Crematory. This is not a new book, so some of you may have read it before, but it was new to me and it was very enlightening. It was something that I would recommend to other people. And I talk a lot in the other video about how funeral practices and the respect of the dead and respect that should be given in this country to our dead and respect that is not given. So you're probably going to say, what is wrong with you, Nicole? You're such a hypocrite when I talk about the next book that I gave 5 stars to. This is by David Sedaris. He is one of my favorite authors. This is a collection of essays that he wrote, and the one essay that I wanted to talk about today is titled A Better Place. He is completely irreverent and disrespectful to his father, who has died in this essay. But if you know David Sedaris' writing, you know that that is his thing. He writes what everybody else is thinking but is too afraid to say. Basically. I don't know if he is like this in real life. I don't know if he would necessarily verbalize the things that he writes, but he's so sarcastic and he's so just, I don't even know if the word is brave that I'm looking for, but he just puts it out there and it's funny. He's just funny. And I think that he's doing it on purpose to be funny. he kind of reminds us not to take ourselves so seriously. There are times to be serious. There are times to be respectful and to be devout. But then there's times where you just need to relax and let go and laugh. And that's what I love him for. So this is a complete contrast from the conversation that I had with you guys about Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. But I want to read an abbreviated version of this essay. I'm going to leave a couple paragraphs out because this is a different way to kind of look at things, but I also think it's kind of a true way. Like, I will say, when I was at the dinner after my brother's funeral, things like this were happening. People were coming up to me saying things that were just inappropriate and rude. I mean, someone came up to me and told me that, you know, out of the three of us children, my brother was her favorite. Like, people just say awkward things because I think they don't know what to say. And so this is kind of his frame of mind at his father's funeral, or like the dinner after his father's funeral. And it just made me laugh because if at that time in my life I would have said half the things that were going through my brain, they may or may not have been true later on. Like, I may have looked back and said, oh, why did I say that? I really was just stressed or whatever. But he's able to take you into that moment and put you right in it, and then at the end say, well, this is why. So, and I'll just read it. It's titled A Better Place. Doesn't all our greatest art address the subject of death, its cruelty, its inevitability, the shadow it casts on our all too brief lives? What does it all mean, we ask ourselves? Allow me to tell you. Death means that the dinner reservation you made for a party of 7 needs to be up to 10, then lower to 9, and then up again, this time to 14. 18 will ultimately show up, so you will have to sit at a foretop on the other side of the room with people you just vaguely remember, listening as the fun table, the one with your sparkling sister at it, laughs and laughs. You, meanwhile, have to hear things like, well, I know that your father did his best. People love saying this when a parent dies. It's the first thing they reach for. A man can beat his wife with car antennas, can trade his children for drugs or motorcycles, but still, when he finally mercifully dies, his survivors will have to hear from some know-nothing at the post-funeral dinner that he did his best. This, I'm guessing, is based on the premise that we all give 110% all the time, regarding everything. Our careers, our relationships, the attention we pay to our appearance, etc. Look around, I want to say. Very few people are actually doing the best they can. That's why they get fired from their jobs. That's why they get arrested and divorced. It's why their teeth fall out. Do you think the chef responsible for this waterlogged spanakopita is giving it his all? Is sitting across from me spouting cliches and platitudes honestly the best you can do? Also, don't use the word passed at this table unless it's as in, Tula passed me the salt so I could flavor my tasteless tzatziki sauce. Or, I knew we were driving too slowly on our way to the funeral when the hearse passed us, and the man driving it gave me the finger. My father did not pass. Neither did he depart. He died. Why the euphemisms? Who were they helping? I remember hearing a woman on the radio a few years back reflecting on where she was the moment that Prince, the musician, transitioned. Really? I thought. And when exactly did he become a woman? Days before his fatal drug overdose? Also, can we give the whole looking down from heaven bit a rest? This, as in, I'm sure your mother is looking down right now at you and your family. He'll always be with you is another tiresome chestnut I'd be happy never to hear again. What if 64 years of constant criticism and belittlement were enough, and I'm actually fine with my father and me going our separate ways, him in a cooler at the funeral home, and me here at the kids' table? He won't be in his grave for another few days. Is that the better place you've been assuring me he's headed to? The cemetery we pass on our way to the airport? The plot with a view of the Roy Rogers parking lot? And what exactly is it better than? This restaurant, clearly, but what else? This state? This country? This earth? No offense, but how can you be so sure of his whereabouts? You didn't even know where the men's room was until I told you, so why should I suddenly believe that you're omniscient? The best you can say with any degree of certainty is that my father's in another place, meaning not the only restaurant in town that could accommodate a party of 18 with 5 hours notice, which, hint, it could do only because nobody else wants to eat here, especially me. It's just that I need to keep my strength up, because I'm grieving. David Sedaris can take any moment, any awkward moment especially, and make it relatable, make it honest, make it funny. And we've all been there. We've all been in these moments where we want to say these scathing things, but we're too polite, or we don't think of it until later, or whatever, but he writes it. And that's what I love about him. So this was a 5-star book for me. I know he's not for everybody. And you know, this is just another example of someone that I probably don't have a whole lot in common with. I mean, he's a gay man. I'm a heterosexual woman. He's, I think, an atheist. I'm a Christian. Like, you know, we just probably don't live very similar lives, but I respect him as a human, and I respect him as a writer, and I will always buy his books. So those are the 9 books that I read during the month of January. Good morning. Here I am in our library. This is our home library that I've been renovating for, I feel like, almost a week now. And it's just taking some time because I'm doing it in between my mom duties and other things, appointments, and it's just taking a little bit longer than I wanted it to. I am going to finish, you can see like that shelf is not painted up there. I'm going to finish painting shelves and getting them put up on the wall, and then I have to let the paint cure because I don't want to slide the books onto the shelves and have the paint chip off. So probably not going to get the books on the shelf until next week. I just want to really give it some time for the paint to cure. But I have to run to the hardware store because I need to buy some more paint. If you see that these shelves behind me are empty, it's because I haven't put the books up yet. I have spent the last week or so moving shelves from an upstairs bedroom to down here, painting the whole wall, painting the shelves, repainting some of the shelves that wouldn't take the paint, cutting shelves down to size, and just really trying to get everything to dry. It is quite the process, but I will take you along on my book organization when that happens. So if that's something you're interested in, just keep your eye out for that video. If you liked what you saw here today, I hope you will join me again. I will be posting more videos about reading and books, but also knitting and simple living. So I hope to see you soon. Have a great day. Bye.